Hi, welcome back to Jen's Addiction. I'm so glad that you came back to see me today. And what I hope is just kind of a fun, thought-provoking episode. It was really brought on originally because of a lot of great comments that everybody gave me in my last video about my record haul that I had, where I went record shopping and came up with quite a lot of amazing 80s finds for my collection. But a couple of those I wasn't sure about when I picked them up, and I thought maybe they were compilation records, in part because I didn't recognize the covers, and on a couple of them the print was kind of small. And I have to say, obviously I need these little things. I can't always see as good as I would like, and so I didn't have them with me. And when I can't see, if I don't recognize a cover, if it looks like something I don't have, and the price is right, I will tend to just take a risk and buy it, right? The first one that got a lot of buzz, I think, and feedback was from the Psychedelic Furs. Yes, this is the third record. When I looked at the back and just saw Love My Way and President Gas, I did not recognize the cover off this one. So this is the reissue, the US release. I'm more familiar with the cover for the UK version. So that's what was registering in my head. But yes, this is the reissue US version of the Psychedelic Furs. It's great too, by the way. Of course, as you all know, if you're Furs fans, can't go wrong with that one. The next one that got a ton of comments, and what really got me then thinking about the subject I'm going to tackle here in a minute, would be React from The Fix. So this was their last album for MCA Records. So Adam Woods, their drummer, had often stated that MCA was not really interested in helping them creatively in their creative pursuits in their music. They wanted them to re-record Red Skies. They did that, I think, begrudgingly, according to him. It appears on this record. It is a live record and a studio record. See, it was like really tiny print, and which states that over here. But on this side, I'm just looking at the titles, which is what initially made me think that it was a compilation, because you've got Stand or Fall, Saved by Zero, Are We Ourselves, One Thing Leads to Another. So Red Skies is a favorite of mine, as is Deeper and Deeper. So some new material, but then some live recording material, a nice combination of both. The live recordings were just, I think, recorded so well. It was hard for me to tell what was live and what wasn't. I've heard this record before. I'd never owned it. And I've also seen other versions, I think, where this pattern is kind of bigger on the LP itself. So super happy again to get this copy of The Fix. But in thinking about their contractual obligation to MCA, which the next one they did was Calm Animals for RCA, it sort of got me thinking about, what other bands would have maybe had contractual obligation records. I know there's some that are pretty standard, but when I kind of was looking it up, there's a few that stood out to me that I was unfamiliar with. So I thought I would go over those fairly quickly, not too much detail. One copy, which I think is the standout, I happen to own, so I'm going to save that one. I'm kind of calling it best for last. But perhaps some of you have some favorite contractual obligation records, things that you were super excited that artists ended up making or were forced to make, and they ended up being some of your favorites. That would kind of be fun to see what you think below. I definitely, as I said, have one for myself, which I'm going to highlight at the very end. And also, have you ever bought records and you couldn't see what they were, and you got them home and you were happily surprised with what you got? Because apparently I have. I don't know, guys, glasses or not, I'm just kind of vain, and I'm not used to always having to have glasses. And now that I'm over 50, I have to have them, but I don't always like to wear them. So I don't know, glasses or no glasses. You can kindly tell me below what you think. I guess it doesn't matter. I have to wear them anyway, right? I did take a few notes, though, on some of these bands. So if I refer to those, kind of bear with me. But as I highlight these, the very first one, though, that I really want to highlight is Marvin Gaye's Here, My Dear from 1978. And part of what I liked about that was just the story behind it. You have contractual obligation records where a record company is forcing you to do something. And then you have a situation like this where he's in the middle of a divorce with his wife, Anna. The estate does not have, it's not as lucrative. He's, I believe, kind of in the midst of dealing with drug abuse. So in order to have enough money to have a divorce settlement, her brother owned the record company. I think he was the boss of the record company that Marvin was doing work with. And they said, look, you come in, you record this album, 50% of those profits are going to go to Anna, and then the rest can go to you. And he went in thinking, I'm just going to go in and make a lazy, crazy record. And well, it didn't sell very well, but I think it stood the test of time. A lot of folks consider it to be a very kind of soul-bearing record that might be considered up there with some of his finest works long term, as it sort of journals a couple, meeting, falling in love, and ultimately breaking up. So she may not have gotten money initially from it right away, but I think over time she did, and he definitely ended up with a record that I think has stood the test of time. I have not heard it all, nor have I listened to it consistently, but of the few things that I've ever heard off of it, it is, he just has a wonderful voice. So even if he wasn't trying very hard, I still think that it was a success in that regard. But it did make it to number 26 on the pop charts, but and number 4 on the R&B charts. So, some folks did like it. It might have taken a little while to catch on, but eventually it did. So the next record that is probably very obvious to a lot of people, but I think definitely worth mentioning, would be Prince's Chaos and Disorder from 1996. And that was sort of another landmark situation where an artist was willing to come forward and publicly say, I don't like Warner Brothers. I don't like what they do with my music. I don't like my inability to be creative under this company and this contract, and I want out. And so he was very vocal about it. The album he makes after this one is Emancipation. This particular one is when you probably recognize him with slave written on his face. He did not refer to himself as Prince. It was the artist formerly known as Prince, or just the symbol. He had often commented that he just kind of went in and just made this album really quickly. But if you get onto princevault.com, they mentioned that this was a selection of songs that he had written and recorded over 3 years. So perhaps he just used material he had to put something together. Maybe he was planning an exit all that time, and this was just kind of the lead up, and maybe he had specific songs planned out and had been curating it more than we even realize. I guess it's hard to know now, but I do find it extremely fascinating to even think about it in that context. So I think this album only made it to number 26 in the Billboard 200. It did not chart on any R&B charts, but I still believe, even though there's some great funky bits to this record, which I really love and appreciate, that have that classic Prince sound to them. But it's not, obviously, not, like some of his previous records would be. It's not in those moments, but I think as part of his overall body of work, it's an extremely interesting and important record, just in the realm of how musicians dealt with record companies and contracts. And it highlights a lot of things that may or may not be good about the industry. So I think it's important that way, and really probably valuable, I think, just to have, for nothing else, for that. Another record which I really, really love, which would be up there in my top records, I guess, isn't really even, I don't even think it was necessarily all that bad, would be Jimi Hendrix' Band of Gypsies, the live recording he did in New York at the Fillmore East. It was the night, New Year's Eve nights of 69 into New Year's Day, 1970. It's, original material. He owed that to the record label before he would go on and do, was starting his next kind of segment of his recording career. But it has become a classic. It's definitely one of my favorites. He's got a 12-minute version of Machine Gun, which is just amazing live guitar playing. You can hear all of the hallmarks of him and signature sounds that I think are undeniably and unmistakably Jimi Hendrix. things that would probably go on to inspire someone like Prince. So, with that kind of in mind, if you haven't heard Band of Gypsies, I would say definitely do so. I do mention it in my video, what is better, music the year you were born or the year you graduated high school? And this was a top pick for me. It's still a top pick and a favorite of all the, and obviously Jimmy's catalog is not that huge, but if a record company was going to kind of put him on the spot to make something, and putting out a live album was a great way to do it. I mean, what a way, because we lose him in 6 months after that. And, this is, I think, probably looked up there in the ranks of one of his best live recorded performances. So I would definitely recommend Band of Gypsies. So I just think that's a fantastic record. Power of Love, or Power to Love is, I think, my favorite one off that particular album. So another one, these next two are examples, I think, of contractual obligation records, though, that sort of show how an artist can be like, you're going to make me make a record, I'll show you. And Van Morrison, he did that contract breaking sessions in 1967. He had, I think, a decent relationship with Bert Burns, who owned the record label. But when Bert died, his wife Irene became the head of that company, and I think Van had issues with her. They had quite a long legal battle and ended up making a settlement where he would have to produce 36 original songs for her publishing company. And he did. And he went in and did 36 songs, I think, in one day, with titles like Ringworm, Blow in Your Nose, Nose in Your Blow, and Big Royalty Check. And then he would go on to work with Warner Brothers and release Astral Weeks in like 1968. But definitely kind of, sticking it to the company. The songs were short and quick, but I think it said everything. And it just sat on a shelf. It was never released. It probably didn't even make them any money. I mean, obviously, if it's just sitting there, they can do. But he did his part, and he just kind of moved on, which I thought was pretty great. But they did reissue, I think, a 2 CD, or I don't know if it ever came out on vinyl, anniversary album. And I think some of those songs, if not all of them, I had a track list that I found were all kind of produced. So that was pretty cool. I'm a fan of Monty Python. I love their live recordings. Of course, I loved all their movies. And coming right off of, I think it was Life of Brian, their company said, we want you to do another album. And I don't think they wanted to do another album. So in 1980, they did Contractual Obligation. Let's see, Van Morrison did Contract Breaking Sessions. Monty Python did Contractual Obligation Record. And this one would complete their contract with Charisma Records. I think, a lot of it is singing. There was a couple of moments, though, they probably wish they hadn't asked them. They have a song on that album called Farewell to John Denver. Some albums will have that song on them. Some later releases will have that omitted because there was issue with it being an Annie's song parody. They were concerned about copyright, and also people thought it was in bad taste because it talks about, obviously, I think the death of John Denver. They replaced a lot of it with an apology track on the records. Another one was called Sit on My Face, and I Bet You Won't Play This Song. So there was a few different songs on there that definitely caused some stir. The company was probably like, hello, you need to not. Charisma Records, I think their parent company was Arista. But I thought that was pretty funny. I mean, even the record album, everything about it just kind of says, yeah, whatever, I'm making this record. I mean, what do they expect, right? When they asked Monty Python to do a record, they just were like, oh yeah, sure, we're going to make this amazing thing that you're forcing us to do. I don't think so. So there's that. So the very last record I want to highlight today is one that I love, made in 1980. It came after what's considered his Berlin trilogy, and that is David Bowie's Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. I loved this album. I remember when it came out new, Ashes to Ashes, Fashion. I mean, there's just I think it's classic Bowie. And it went on to chart at number 12 on the Billboard charts in the US. I really believe it's kind of seen as a definite standout and hallmark to his contribution to rock and roll, right? So this one this is my original copy that I had as a kid. Still love it, still played it all the time. But if you had to force somebody to make something, and I don't even know, maybe he wasn't really forced. Maybe he just was sort of finishing up. But I don't know. I thought it was a great record. He goes on after this to EMI, and that's when he makes Let's Dance in Tonight. So I think to finish out with RCA on this note was not a terrible way to go. Again, I find it to be absolutely one of my favorite Bowie albums. It's definitely that line between new wave at the time, which sort of, I think, with the makeup and the costuming would be like the Blitz Club in England, and then things that he did previous. I did like the fact too that he sort of has that homage to his last records on there. So those were just kind of neat little. There's Low. So I just thought those were really kind of neat little extras that they put on there that sort of ties everything together, and just the whole era in his music ties it all together pretty well. So that's it. That's kind of my top fun picks to think about for contractual obligation records, really brought on by all the comments and things that we were talking about related back to the fix. And so I sort of would love to know if any of you have a favorite contractual obligation record. Maybe it's something that you listen to all the time. Maybe it's funny, maybe it's ironic. I don't know. Maybe you didn't wear your glasses and you picked something up at the store and you didn't know what it was till you got home, and then found out that it was fantastic and totally worth your time. But any way you look at it, I think it's pretty awesome that all of this music was made, regardless of maybe the circumstances it was made under. They all have a story to tell, and it's pretty entertaining, and there's a lot more of them out there. Like I said, I just touched on 6 that I thought were fun to kind of look at and think about. So on that note, I will leave you all to think about any other contractual obligations maybe you have to do today, like mow the grass or read a book or I don't know what. But until then, I hope you're spinning some great tunes. I hope you're finding some wonderful new music, or not by accident or on purpose. And you'll come back and see me next time. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It does mean an awful lot. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you. Have a great one. See you soon.